This is a book review of a book entitled The Painted Word. It came out 50 years ago by a then very famous author named Tom Wolfe. I had read 3 of his books about the West Coast fast car scene, the West Coast drug scene, and about the New York highbrow people being mau-maued by the Black Panthers. This was another one, also set in New York, about the art scene. Tom Wolfe had an amazing insight that what mattered about art was not the art itself, but what was said about the art. Paint anything, as long as it's got a good story, it will sell. Our own taste doesn't matter. It's a question of what we are taught we should like. It's a matter of herd instinct. We are herd animals. We do what we're told to do. And they tell us what is worth liking, and they tell us what to think about it. The 2 guys dominating the art scene in New York, which dominated the world art scene at that time, were art critics, people who wrote rather than painted. They were both the sons of immigrants from Eastern Europe. Harold Rosenberg, writing for a long time at the New Yorker magazine, and Clement Greenberg, who had a string of magazines of his own, small literary magazines. But the 2 of them dominated opinion setting in the New York art scene in the middle of the 20th century. These guys, as I said, shared a background. Eastern European people, the same people that invented the broadcast industry, the public relations industry, the advertising industry, the movie industry. You know the people. They were thought leaders of the time. And they all came from Eastern Europe, where they had been fomenting against the Tsar, who was no doubt glad that they were an American problem, no longer a Russian problem, and advocating leftist causes or anarchist causes. And that continued. Okay, so these guys were born shortly after the birth of modern art. Here's a story about that. The picture on the left in this was painted by a starving artist in France called Pablo Picasso. The picture on the right was painted by a millionaire artist named Pablo Picasso a couple of decades later. You can see how much his technique had improved. Same thing happened with others. This is Georges Braque, who was a struggling impressionist. That was a school of the late 1890s, and as a cubist. In fact, he invented the word cubism, or rather, he didn't invent it. Somebody said, his work looks like a bunch of cubes, and he took that insult as a compliment and called it cubism. Cubism dominated the art scene in Europe in the first decade of the 20th century, but it didn't really catch on with art critics. There weren't formal art critics back then. But after World War I, art critics came into being, and in the 1920s, they were praising art that had the modern themes. And here's a couple of pieces. This piece, you can see, is both representational, it shows a jazz band, but it's got cubist and impressionist motifs. This one likewise. The money of the 1920s expressed through Cubist and modern art techniques. So modern art had caught on by the 1920s, but then came the 1930s, a decade of depression and dictatorships, and the styles changed along with it. You had social realism, which glorified the working man. Here's Soviets glorifying the working man in Lithuania. I'm sure the Lithuanians were thrilled, and the American Gothic glorifying the working farmer and traditional values in America. And this is something from Franklin Roosevelt. There was more in common between America and Soviet Russia than people like to let on. Roosevelt did something about unemployment by putting people to work on the public payroll, painting murals like this. This was on a post office in Oregon, glorifying the working man. So there was a theme behind all of this painting, and the theme was the glory of the working man and conversely the evil of the capitalists and so on. The idea that art had to have a theory took hold. And the aforementioned art critics, the Berg brothers, Rosenberg and Greenberg, made a big deal out of it. And this is the thing that caught Tom Wolfe's attention and made him write the book. Just a single phrase, all art must have a theory. In other words, you can't just look at it and say, I like it. No, that's your sentiments, that's other things at play. What it needs is to touch your brain. It needs to have a theory behind it. And the Berg brothers promoted theories. The theory on the left is flatness, that there should be no dimension to a painting. A painting is two-dimensional, and if the paint is more than half a millimeter thick, you've done it wrong. And the theory on the right is action. A painting should portray action. It's not just a still thing, it's motion captured in oil. Well, whether you believe these theories or not, it worked out for the Berg brothers in their criticism. They were literary lions, and worked out for the artists. This is Jackson Pollock on the left. That painting sold for $200 million last time it was auctioned. And this is Willem de Kooning, who was Rosenberg's favorite. This one sold for $300 million. So you may not appreciate the art, but I think you can appreciate the Benjamins involved in the art. Just to go a little further, here's a whole wall full of action art. It looks to me like you could use artificial intelligence with a wild training session on color to produce this stuff. But no matter, it's very valuable. So this was the 1950s. And here's the theme. Taste in art is not established by us, the hoi polloi, but by a select few. And Wolfe goes on to tell you who those select few are. Those are the rich. And they use their taste in art to distinguish themselves from the rest of us. They must be better than us because they're rich, and to prove it, they show that they have more highly developed taste than we do. And these are the Rockefellers, the Guggenheims, the Fords, the Sacklers, people like that. So they have to demonstrate that they have better taste than we do. But how do they know if they have good taste? Well, they go to the experts, who are the art critics. These transformed socialists from Eastern Europe, who are the art critics. And the art critics tell them what to like in multiple publications. But what are the art critics, where do they get their ideas? Well, they get it from other trendsetters in culture, from academia, from the intellectual leaders of the day, and they're always banging the drum for their causes. It was the working man and the abused consumer around 1900. It was the laborer, the common laborer, in the days of communism, and it was communism itself in the 1930s, and then by the end of the 20th century, it was diversity. And you saw a lot of art with rainbow flags and people of various colors and so on, and people like me depicted rather evilly. Anyhow, art had to have a theme, and these were the themes that the art critics borrowed from the leaders, the thought leaders in society, and the rich people bought the art. And you and I were not part of the game. We are the bourgeoisie, and the theme, even from the middle of the 19th century, Charles Baudelaire, Oscar Wilde, and so, in French, épatez les bourgeoisie. That's us. Shock the bourgeoisie. If it wasn't shocking, if it wasn't new, it wasn't really art or literature or anything else. Now, a problem with this abstract art, this $200 and $300 million stuff, was that the common man didn't like it much. You didn't find much of that art hanging on walls like mine. They wanted something that was more, actually the public wanted something that was more approachable. And the art critics, Greenberg, the Berg brothers, Greenberg, Rosenberg, missed the turn on this. Andy Warhol came along giving people what they liked. Pop art. This is cartoon art. So it's pretentious, highbrow, expensive, but for lowbrow taste, you and I can relate to this picture. We may like it or may not, but there's not much mystery what it's about. And they celebrated crass middle-class taste. This is kind of a send-up. These expensive artists in New York City are kind of mocking and celebrating the common man all at once. So that's what pop art was about. And that was the reigning art form when Tom Wolfe wrote. The cri du jour, the new thing then, was photorealism, where they'd take a photograph and they would paint the photograph, such as this one called Stardust, Stardust Motel in Las Vegas. I visited Las Vegas at that time. It's a very good depiction of what he was looking at. But there's always something new in art. There's Damien Hirst's Pickled Animals, or Banksy drawing on streets, or Andreas Serrano putting a statuette of Christ in a jar of urine and calling that art. There's always something new, and there's always something to shock the bourgeoisie. Well, I'm shocked. So think, as you look at a work of art, as you attend our Art Talkers Club, what are you looking at? Who is it that wants you to like what you're looking at? Why do they want you to like it? What's the message? You could ask yourself, what are the real criteria for beauty? It used to be things like symmetry, composition, color, things like that. Now, what are the criteria for beauty? It seems that they have changed or just been forgotten. And a last question I'd like to ask you, didn't we do better before people were telling us what to like, when we made up our own minds? Throughout this presentation, you've been looking in the background at this painting by a guy who never made much money at all in his lifetime painting. He just painted what he liked, and only after he died did we discover that we like it. Actually, our member Constantine has told us all about Vincent van Gogh. This is his Almond Blossoms. Not a famous painting, but I like it more than anything else I've shown you today. So that's my message for you. When you're looking at art, make up your mind. Do you like it, or have you been told you should like it, and why? And if it's nice, who cares what the people say? Put it on your wall.